My name is Eugene. I'm an electrical engineer. I stopped eating meat around 1989. I stopped eating eggs and dairy around 2000, and I've now been involved in vegan activism for approximately 22 years. My reasons are entirely ethical. I believe it's morally wrong to torture and kill animals for the pleasure of satisfying our taste buds. And I believe everyone is morally required to be a vegan.
What made you start doing this in 1989?
At that time, I was not aware that there was anyone else on the planet who shared my philosophy. I was 14 years old at the time. I came to that conclusion all on my own, that I think it's wrong to kill animals for food. My parents were very much against my decision to go vegetarian. They did everything they could to get me to eat meat, including lying to me about what was in my food. I went vegetarian over against their objections. And I actually would have done it much earlier if it had not been for their very strenuous opposition. I wanted to go vegetarian much earlier, but when I was 14, I was old enough to be able to do it despite them, their very strenuous disagreement with my decision.
You were young. How did you come to this realization?
I logically reasoned it on my own. I mean, I realized that we don't need it for survival. I was aware of the fact that there are some people who are vegetarian for religious reasons, and they've been doing it for centuries, so obviously we don't need it for our survival, and therefore we're needlessly killing animals just to satisfy our taste buds, and there's absolutely no ethical justification for that.
Did you see animals and think about that?
It's not because they had a special interest in animals. It's in the same way you don't have to have a special interest in Jewish culture in order to be opposed to the Holocaust. I think there's a lot of kids, when they first realize where their food comes from, that's actually their first reaction. That, okay, now then I don't want to eat it. And in many cases, their parents talk them out of it. And in my case, I mean, my parents obviously did everything they could to talk me out of it, and they failed. I think, and the thing is, back then, vegetarianism and veganism was not as common as it is today. Even vegetarianism wasn't very common. So now it's much easier because there's a lot of other people to look to. I did not know any other vegetarians. I wasn't even aware that there are people who shared my philosophy. I was aware that there are some people who are vegetarian for health or religious reasons. I wasn't aware that there were anybody who did it for the reasons I was doing it. And of course, later on, I found out that yes, there actually is a movement, and I got very much involved with it, and I was very active in promoting veganism afterwards.
Where was this when we were 14?
I was in Illinois, Chicago suburbs. I was born in the Soviet Union, in Kiev. I left when I was 3 years old. That was back when that was still part of the Soviet Union. So then I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. I moved to Houston later on, approximately 17 years ago.
Were you all alone the whole,
Yes.
from 1989 to 2000?
Oh, in other words, I did not know any other vegetarians. That's correct. Until much later, I got involved in activism around 2000, and then I actually did meet a lot of other people. And I stopped eating, like I said, I stopped eating eggs and dairy around that time when I got involved in vegan activism. And then I met a whole bunch of people who are vegan.
That 10 years before you went vegan, what kind of stuff were you eating instead of meat?
Oh, I mean, that was a long time ago. I don't remember. There was a long time period between vegetarian and vegan. And back then, there weren't that many vegan options, but vegetarians, there were always vegetarian options. That's always been easy. Now it's actually easy to be a vegan, too, so there's no excuse. I would argue that there's never been an excuse, but now that it's so easy, then there's even less of an excuse.
So what was the catalyst in 2000 that made you go vegan?
Okay, so I was working at an aerospace company, and one of the engineers I was working with, he grew up on a farm, and he slaughtered his own animals, and he completely disagreed with every aspect of my philosophy. He even had a pet snake that he fed live mice to, but because he grew up on a farm, he knew all the details about how the farm animals are treated, far more than any vegan activist possibly could. And he told me I was a hypocrite for consuming eggs and dairy if I think it's wrong to hurt animals. And I said, well, but why? And then he went through all the details, and he convinced me that I was a hypocrite. So the person who raised his own animals for slaughter completely disagreed with all aspects of animal rights. He's the one that convinced me that I needed to go vegan. And I think that tells you something. If a person working in the industry knows that, if you're opposed to hurting animals, you have to be a vegan, that says something.
That reminds me of Brenda Davis, a registered dietitian out of Canada. She was in college when she was younger, and she met a hunter. And the hunter said, at least the animal I killed had a good life. And she was like, wow. Because she was giving him a hard time, That made her not want to eat, store meat. because those animals go through hell.
That's actually true. It is absolutely hypocritical to be criticize hunting if you're still buying meat at a grocery store. First of all, I'm ethically opposed to hunting. However, hunting causes far less suffering than does buying meat at a grocery store.
Did you notice any physiological, mental, or emotional changes when you went vegetarian?
No, okay, so...
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, I went vegetarian gradually and I went vegan gradually. So there's no specific day, like today it begins. So I never really noticed any changes. And now I understand that there's an ethical argument that you are required to go vegan immediately. Because that's like saying, well, I'm going to cut back on how frequently I beat my wife. You know, it's something that's obviously you're required not to do it at all. But it just so happens that I did do it gradually. I mean, even if the ethics were there, the belief in it was there. Actually trying to implement it, that did take gradually. And different people are different. Some people, go right away, and some people do it gradually. And I understand the ethical argument; you're required to do it immediately. But in practice, often some people do it gradually. The issue with me was the fact that my parents were constantly trying to get me to eat meat. And they're kind of, oh, we'll just make an exception just this once. Oh, just this once. Oh, we already prepared it for you. It's going to go to waste. They're pressuring me. That's why I couldn't. And like I said, I wanted to do it many years earlier. There was some controversy over the precise definition of veganism. And back then, I got involved with some groups which had a different definition of veganism than the one I hold now. Now I'm very careful about avoiding hidden ingredients. But back then, they were saying, like, oh, don't worry about it. Because they wanted to attract more people. Initially, when I stopped eating eggs and dairy, at least initially, I wasn't careful about the hidden ingredients. And now I'm much more careful about it than I was back then. So that's why it's hard to say on this specific day I became vegan because I became more and more careful about what I was consuming.
Do you feel like it's important for people in general to do this?
Yes, if we consume animal products, we're literally paying people to torture animals on our behalf. And of course, I believe it's morally wrong regardless how well the animals are treated, I believe it's wrong to kill them for food when it's not necessary for survival in principle. But even if you don't agree with that, I mean, if you're opposed to the torture of animals, then you definitely have to be vegan because that's what we're doing right now. Even the so-called free-range, organic, the cage-free, typically that's horrible. I mean, even people who work in the industry will acknowledge this. I mean, I've actually, in my activism, I've actually talked to a lot of people who work in the industry, and they typically agree with what I just said. Yeah. I mean, even if they're not vegan themselves, they actually agree with philosophically with what I'm saying.
What is the most important thing for you now? Has that changed since you initially went, or are you still kind of the same? Like, important reasons for you to be vegan right now?
For me, it's entirely ethical. I'm aware that there's other benefits to it. I mean, it is good for health. It is good for the environment. But I actually think I am concerned when other vegans try to emphasize those things, they're reinforcing the attitude that animal suffering is unimportant. Could you imagine anyone criticizing Jeffrey Dahmer on the grounds that cannibalism increases the chance of heart disease? Could you imagine anyone criticizing Nazi death camps on the grounds that they're an inefficient use of petroleum?
Well, those aren't good analogies, though, really, because it's not normalized to eat humans.
That is correct. The only distinction often is that something is socially acceptable, whereas other thing is not, even though ethically the two are equivalent. Like, for example, if you're opposed to setting cats on fire for entertainment, that's not socially acceptable. However, eating chicken wings causes at least as much suffering. You're getting a few minutes of trivial pleasure. The only difference between the two actions is that one is socially acceptable and the other one isn't. But from an ethical perspective, they're equivalent.
It sounds like the ethics has always been the predominant thing.
It's the only thing. It's nice that there are some health benefits, but that's not the reason I do it. I mean, I do care about my health, but that's not the reason I'm vegan. Yeah. And similarly, it's not the reason I advocate it. I mean, it's great that people will be healthier if they do it correctly. And it is important because, I mean, if you do it wrong, obviously you can make mistakes. But if you do it correctly, you will be healthier, and it is good that it's good for the environment. But the primary reason is because you're literally paying people to torture and kill animals on your behalf, needlessly. For example, I think what separates humans from animals such as lions and tigers is that lions and tigers have to do it to survive. We don't. We have a choice. And of course, obviously, lions and tigers don't force their animals to suffer their entire lives, either in tiny cages. And there's nothing in the predator-prey relationships of nature that comes even close to the level of suffering we're inflicting on animals their entire lives in modern industrialized agriculture.
If it was healthy to eat animals, would you feel different about it?
No, actually, when I first went vegetarian, I was unaware of the fact that it's healthier to be vegetarian. I actually thought I might be hurting my health, but I was willing to do it. because killing the animal versus me having slightly less than optimum health, I mean, that's an easy choice. I'd rather have slightly less than optimal health rather than pay someone to kill animals for me. Now, as it turns out, it's just the opposite is true. You're actually healthier when you go vegan. It's good that it worked out that way, but no, I would still be vegan and advocating people go vegan even if the opposite was the case.
It's hard to imagine being that young and feeling that way.
I mean, I've heard many stories, like 5-year-olds or 4-year-olds, when they first find out, where their hamburger comes from, their first reaction is, I don't want to eat it, but their parents talk them into it.
You ever heard of Gary Orofsky?
Yes, I'm not a fan.
But his best speech ever?
I saw parts of it. I was not. I think we are ethically required to be vegan, but when people make statements that you can find out in 5 seconds are factually incorrect, they lose credibility for everything else they're saying.
His seemed like it was ethical for the most part.
I can go into it. I mean, I don't want to make this interview about why I disagree with certain other vegans, but I would say he thinks that humans are not omnivores. I believe we are. We have the ability to eat both meat and plants. However, the fact that we're omnivores means we have the ability to eat meat, not that we're required to. And that's why I believe we're obligated to not eat meat, because we have the ability to live without hurting animals, and therefore we have an obligation to do that. He also makes a comment about religion, about how the Bible says thou shalt not kill, and of course in the Bible killing was permitted. I mean, it was not a pacifistic religion. They had the death penalty for a variety of offenses. Obviously it condoned eating meat. Now, in terms of the meat eating in the Bible, what I would say to those people is, one, even if you think it's okay to eat meat in principle, the torture of animals is an abomination in every major religion, yet that's precisely what every man, woman, and child in our society is doing today, given how modern animal agriculture operates. If we pay the people in the videos to do this on our behalf, we're just as responsible as they are. Now, as for the question of if it's done humanely, I would point out that, I believe in the theory of evolution, but I would point out that there are vegans who do believe in the literal interpretation of Genesis, literal interpretation of the Bible. And Genesis is, by the way, it's the same in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And according to the literal interpretation of Genesis, no animal died in the Garden of Eden prior to the original sin. It's in the Garden of Eden that in the Bible says God gave human dominion over the animals. However, in the context of death not yet existing in the world, that could not have possibly referred to killing and eating the animals. Many people believe that dominion is more accurately interpreted as stewardship rather than tyranny. In Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, no animal ever died. There are some people who believe in the literal interpretation of the Bible who interpret that to mean that veganism is the highest ethical ideal.
So I couldn't even become an advocate until I realized that it was actually healthier for people. Does that make sense?
Yes. I would say it would be morally obligated to do it. It depends on how unhealthy it is. I mean, it's a question of is it the equivalent of eating a Twinkie, or is it the equivalent of, shaving 20 years off your life? So, you understand.
If we had to eat animals, then it would be hard to advocate against it.
Well, here's the thing. In the case where you have to do it, there's the proverbial question of, if you are on a stranded on a desert island, there's nothing else to eat. In that case, I actually think cannibalism, you could argue, is ethically permissible, if there really is no other option. But when there is an option, that scenario no longer applies. So the point is that yes, we can think about hypothetical scenarios where we had to do it, but the good news is that we're not in that scenario. We're in a scenario where there are many healthy vegan options available, and we don't have to do it. Now, in between the extremes, where there's absolutely nothing else to eat, and where there's plenty of other options to eat, and it's actually healthier to be vegan, there's the intermediate scenario where, yes, you can be vegan, but you won't have optimal health. That's also a scenario we don't have to deal with, because that's not the scenario we live in.
That's where people in the carnivore keto movement, they're trying to convince people that we're not certain of that yet.
Well, the fact that there's plenty of vegans that have been vegan for a long time, so we have lots of data on it. Maybe when the vegan movement was starting in 1944 with the Vegan Society, that may have been a valid argument that we don't have enough data. But now there's so many people that have been vegan for so long that we have enough statistical data that go, yeah, it's okay. Especially if you do it right. You can get sick if you don't know what you're doing. For example, if you don't get your B12, you need to get B12 either from fortified food or from supplements. And if you don't do that, you'll get in trouble. And there's some other things that you have to make sure you get your omega-3 fatty acids. There's a variety of sources from it. But so long as you do those things, you're fine. If you eat nothing but vegan donuts and French fries, you'll get in trouble. And there are people who do that. And those are the ones you hear about in the news who end up in the hospital. And that's why what gives veganism sometimes a bad name. But if you know what you're doing, if you're not an idiot, you'll be healthy.
Could you be with somebody who isn't vegan?
Okay, I wouldn't have any interest in that.
Really?
I am single right now, but no, actually, I saw an interesting thing online, and when I read it once, I said, yeah, I think I agree with that. They said not only would they not have any interest in dating someone who's not vegan, they wouldn't have any interest in dating a vegan who's okay with dating someone who's not vegan. Because they said that in that case, your veganism isn't that important to you.
You don't believe that maybe you could help convert that person?
I am involved in trying to convert people all the time, and I've actually been very successful at it over the past 20 years. I've convinced thousands and thousands of people to go vegan or to move to a vegan lifestyle. So you don't need to date someone to convert them.
But I mean, couldn't you date somebody with the potential of them going vegan eventually?
I think that's disingenuous to start a relationship like that. I mean, if you make it clear to them, like, look, I'm only going to stay with you if you go vegan. If you say that on your first date, I suppose that's okay. But if you lead them on let them think that that this is going to be okay, when secretly you think like, okay, they better convert or I'm leaving them, I think that's dishonest. I mean, so I suppose if you're upfront with it and say, okay, I'm willing to date you, but if you don't go vegan in this amount of time, I'm going to leave you. I mean, yeah, I suppose if that's you explain that in your first date, I suppose, or maybe even before the first date, when you agree to go on the first date, if as long as you explain that and they're okay with that, I mean, maybe that's okay. But I think it's very disingenuous to to lead them on otherwise. I mean, they're not vegan. It's not like it's like, oh, I didn't realize you ate meat.
Do you do anything to maybe reinforce or kind of affirm the ethics, like going to sanctuaries and things like that, or documentaries? You expose yourself to that to kind of...
Well, obviously, I've seen documentaries because I've shown them to people.
Like Earthlings and Dominion.
Actually, I don't... Those specific ones, I think I watched part of Earthlings, but I mean, I've watched plenty of documentaries. Maybe not those specific ones.
Where they show the horrors.
Yeah, and I've shown those documentaries to people, and I found that's actually very effective at getting people. But I also think it's important to couple that with a philosophical argument rather than just showing gory pictures alone. When I stopped eating meat, I was not aware that factory farms existed. I only found out about that many years later. Well, I don't know if many years, a couple years later. So, I mean, to me, it doesn't matter how horrible it is. I think, obviously it matters to the animals how horrible it is. What I'm saying is I think it's still wrong to kill animals for food, even if they're treated well. So I mean, and no, I haven't gone to sanctuaries. Like I said, to me, it's a purely an ethical argument, and you don't need to have a special interest in Jewish culture to be opposed to the Holocaust. And by the way, for anyone watching this who's offended that, I would like to mention that I personally had a large number of family members who died in the Holocaust, so I think I'm entitled to say that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, there's a lot of Jewish people in this movement, and I've interviewed quite a few, and they say the same thing. Yeah. Do you have any regrets?
Regrets? Well, I've been fairly successful in my activism. If I knew then what I know now, I might not have actually been as successful as I was. For example, like I spent many years handing out the pamphlets. If I had my philosophy now back then, I might never gotten involved with them. My philosophy differs even from what their philosophy was when I first got involved with them. I was very successful in converting a lot of people by giving out lots and lots of pamphlets. I don't know, it's hard to answer that question. I also was very successful with converting people through videos and various other means. There's some science fiction stories where you go back in time and you change one thing, and then you have a lot of unintended repercussions of that. My concern is if I say, yeah, if I could only change this, the problem is a lot of the other things would have changed, and that may have washed away a lot of the good activism I did. Because you can't just change one thing and not change the whole thing.
What do you think's been the most effective way to be an activist?
Okay, for me, I found I can't do it again because the rules have changed, but I found a very effective way. I actually did paid advertisements on Facebook to my own website where I showed factory farming videos. And back then, Facebook, the Facebook staff actually reviewed my page and they permitted me to run advertisements to children, ages 13 and above. I received the comments from thousands of people saying that they're going vegan, and these are people who were eating meat up until a few seconds ago. Now the rules have changed, they don't allow that anymore. They banned any links to my entire web domain because they decided it was inappropriate, even though before they reviewed it and thought it was perfectly okay to market it to children. What happened was, I think Facebook got scrutinized for some of the content on Facebook, not necessarily related to animal rights, but some of the other things, like regarding the elections and stuff like that. So then they started tightening up the rules of what type of advertisements they allow. And I think one of the consequences of that is that they not only banned all my advertisements, they actually banned my entire website domain from being shared. They went back in time and deleted all Facebook posts that had a link anywhere to my domain. But I mean, it's okay. By the time they did it, I had to reach many millions of people, and most of them were young people, so they have their whole life ahead of them. And like I said, many of them on my website, I had a Facebook plugin, so I had a comment section, and people were constantly writing comments about how they're never eating meat again, they're going vegan, and some of them I stayed in contact with, and I know they're still vegan because they're my friends on Facebook. So I know I can't say that 100% of them stayed vegan, but at least the ones I'm aware of, they are vegan, and they've been involved in activism too.
So are you on Facebook in a way that others watching this might be able to connect with you, or do you have maybe a website related to this, or anything you want to share?
Yes, I have a website, veg1.org. It's VEG, then the number 1, and then .org. If you click on my name, you'll be able to see links to my other websites too. At the very top, it says Animal Rights and Vegan Ethics by my name. If you click on my name, it'll take you to where it has links to other web pages.
When I asked you the previous question, the most effective ways to advocate that you found, anything that you could share with us that's been effective that others might be able to repeat or replicate, because they aren't going to be able to replicate it.
Yeah, I even myself can't replicate it because the rules have changed.
Yeah.
If you go to my website and you read through my ethical arguments, you'll be prepared to answer the most commonly asked questions, both secular and religious, so that you're not afraid to have an intellectual discussion with someone. A lot of vegans are afraid of that. If you read my answers, you will be, in fact, and I'm not the only one who says this. I remember at some of the Vegan Society of Peace meetings, some people have asked similar questions, and one person responded, not me, somebody else just went, oh, go read Eugene's website, and because then you'll be equipped. And I'll say this is where I differ with a lot of some of my fellow vegan activists. There is a certain trend within the vegan movement to say we should avoid debating. I think all ideas should be debated. It's how progress is made in science, in technology. Scientists and engineers debate ideas about how to best do things. It's how advances in any free and democratic society. They debate ideas to try to see which ideas are the good ones. And it doesn't mean acrimonious. I mean, it's in a friendly session, but it's a friendly manner. No one gets angry, no one gets upset, but you have to be prepared for questions like, well, should we prevent other animals from killing each other, for example? I've been asked that, and the answer is no, because it would create an ecological disaster. For example, it's necessary for lions and tigers to hunt in order for an ecological balance to be maintained, whereas farm animals exist in such large numbers only because humans breed them for slaughter. And animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of wildlife habitat destruction. So whereas lions and tigers help the environment and ecology by eating meat, we humans greatly harm the environment and ecology by eating meat. But most importantly, lions and tigers have to eat meat to survive, whereas we have a choice in the matter. Yeah, I have a list of questions, and for every question I have a response. And then they link to related questions underneath.
What is one that you're proud of that you formulated a very unique response for?
I don't know if they're unique. Some of my answers are different from the ones other vegans would give. I mean, first of all, that's normal. Vegans are a very diverse group of people. We all have our own opinions on these issues. We all have our own philosophies. So one of the questions sometimes people ask is, don't only humans possess a soul? Now, the answer to this question is not necessarily directly related to the question of, is it ethically acceptable to torture and kill animals for the sake of satisfying our taste buds? Nevertheless, it's a question that frequently comes up, especially in a place like here in Texas. And it's interesting to know, what do the major world religions actually say on this topic? So according to the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, a soul is required to be able to make moral decisions. And a soul is required to be able to know the difference between good and evil. And according to modern science, we now know that other animals know right from wrong much better than we humans do. As one example of this, there was an experiment performed in a group of macaque monkeys where if they pulled a chain, they would receive food, and another macaque monkey, which they could see through a one-way mirror, would receive a painful electric shock. And the question was, would they do it? As it turns out, 87% of them refused to pull the chain and prefer to go hungry. One of the macaques went for nearly 2 weeks without eating rather than hurt another monkey. So these macaque monkeys, who had never heard of the 10 Commandments, had a code of ethics which puts to shame us humans who like to think of ourselves as superior. And as we sit back and wonder how we ourselves would behave if placed in this situation, we should realize that this scenario is not a hypothetical one for us. Every time we make a decision of whether or not to consume animal products, we're making a decision of whether or not to inflict suffering on others for a reward much smaller than food is for a starving monkey. And I believe this situation was best summed up by the story of a Holocaust survivor who immigrated to the United States and then rented an apartment above a slaughterhouse. He said that what he saw in that slaughterhouse every single day was precisely the reason he left Nazi Germany. indifference to the suffering of others simply because they are believed to be different from us.
Right before that, you mentioned that some vegans don't think it's a good idea to debate. And maybe that's because some of the non-vegans have been so contentious, they prefer to deal with low-hanging fruit. Somebody who's primed for this, they'd rather spend their energy on that.
Okay, first of all, if someone's taking the time to debate a vegan, in many cases it means that their conscience is bothering them and they're actually the most ripe for conversion. Also, in many cases, when people stopped to try to do it, they later found out that what really was going on is that they were actually thinking of going vegan or going vegetarian, and they were curious how it would answer these questions. So I think a lot of vegans misread what's going on. A lot of times what's going on is either their conscience is bothering them, or they're actually already thinking about going vegan. Say, okay, let me see. How would you answer about this? How would you answer this question or this question? And I'm very happy. I'm very eager to discuss this. I mean, if you believe that you have the logic and on your side, you should be very happy to have people challenge you, because that gives you an opportunity to demonstrate all the quality of your arguments. You should be happy that they're asking these questions. And I think the real reason vegans get upset when they're asking these questions is because they don't have an answer for them. Not because, for what you just said, not because they think, oh yeah, these people are never going to go vegan anyway. Maybe that's what they're thinking. The real reason is they never thought, the very first time they thought this question is when they're being asked it at the moment. Whereas in my case, I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this, so I'm very happy to share my thoughts about it.
So if somebody appears to be, every time you debunk something they say, they just come up with some random other thing. Oh, plants have feelings. Oh, well, we evolved to eat meat. Oh, there's never been a vegan country or whatever. They keep throwing.
I'm working on that.
They always throw, just keep throwing more and more at you, and it's as if they don't really genuinely seem inquisitive.
Well, I would say this: if they weren't genuinely inquisitive, they wouldn't be talking to you.
Yeah.
The people who probably aren't interested in going vegan, the people who say, "Oh yeah, I respect you," and then they never ask a single question, and they never try to engage with you on it. The fact that they're engaging with you means that they are interested, or they want to see, is there a logical basis for what you're saying? Like I said, I'm a very logical person. I'm probably as left-brained as you go. That's actually one of the reasons I'm probably different from a lot of other vegans. A lot of them tend to be more emotional. The right-brained people. So for them, a lot of it's just emotion. They go, oh, I felt so sad when I saw those videos. But they never thought through these questions. Like they're throwing these questions at them. Well, they never thought about it, so they get upset because they don't have an answer. Whereas I have thought about them. In fact, I asked even if other people hadn't asked me these are questions I want to ask myself. The fact that they're there wanting to talk to you, this is a good thing. I once had a person come up to me. This is when I was handing out Why Vegan pamphlets. He told me that for every animal I don't eat, he's going to eat 3, and he doesn't care about cows because we can always make more of them. I talked to him. I answered all his questions. I addressed everything, all his concerns. By the end of the conversation, he said he's probably going to go vegan. Another person, he had taken my pamphlet. He actually read it. He came back to me and he told me he loves cruelty to animals. He says I think it's cool the way they cut the chickens' beaks off. He loves how they're cruel to animals. And then I told him, apparently a majority of people agree with you. You're one of the few people honest enough to admit it. And he goes, majority of people agree with me? And I said, yes, majority of people read the pamphlet, and they continue to eat meat, so apparently a majority of people agree with you. And he says, I'm so sorry that there are so many stupid people out here like me. I'm so sorry. I'm just messing around with it. I actually think it's horrible what they do to animals. So he and his friends stayed to talk with me for a while, and by the end of this conversation, they took a vegan starter pack with them. Now, a lot of other vegans, they wouldn't have given the person the time of day. But that's a misreading. If someone is taking the time to say those things, either their conscience is bothering them or they want to know more. They're obviously going about it in a not a tactful way, but that is what's going on. If they're not interested, they wouldn't be talking to you. So I think a lot of vegans are misreading those, and they're actually missing. Those actually are the low-hanging fruits because they want to talk to you about it. The problem is not the people who want to talk to you about it, it's all the people who don't want to talk to you about it. It's all the people who say, oh, animal, yeah, I know you have some videos, I'm not really interested. Yeah, I'm sure you want to talk about it, but I don't want to hear about it. Those are the people who are not the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit is anyone who's willing to engage you in a conversation.
Do you think we'll ever see a vegan world?
I think we'll definitely see a vegetarian world, possibly within our lifetime. Vegan world, maybe not. We would get rid of factory farming, and the few animal products that would remain, non-meat animal products, they would no longer be produced through the horrible ways that they're produced right now.
Do you have a favorite quote?
When people say, if you want to be vegan, that's fine, but don't tell me what to do. I would say, well, we're entitled to believe what we like. We're not entitled to treat those weaker than us however we like. If we're responsible for harming others, people have every right to ask that we stop. It's a similar line. This is one I came up with myself, not the previous one, but this one. When people say we shouldn't be trying to force my morality on them, my reply is that vegans are not forcing their morality on others, but if we eat meat, then we're forcing our morality on the animals we're sending to the slaughterhouse.
What about people who say it's a cult, what we're doing?
A cult they usually follow a single leader. You're not allowed to talk to people outside. None of those apply. I mean, we don't have a leader. Obviously, we interact with people outside because cult people usually they don't want people interacting with people outside the cult because that'll pierce their little bubble. We obviously live in a non-vegan world, and we have real jobs. We interact. We usually have non-vegan friends and family. Yeah, where we definitely interact with a non-vegan world, and there actually is no leader in the vegan movement, and probably that's a good thing. If we had one leader, then they could take the whole thing down if they screw up.
Yeah. What about when they act like what we're doing, we're being self-righteous?
Martin Luther King was accused of being self-righteous. For the way he spoke and for the way he behaved. Now, looking back on it, we obviously don't see it that way. But that was the accusation at the time. The definition of self-righteous is when you have absolute certainty of your righteousness. It has a negative connotation because that certainty is often misplaced. So self-righteousness is often associated with hypocrisy. And I think it is important not to be self-righteous, not to be certain of your righteousness, because there will be other issues that we're not aware of. For example, Martin Luther King ate meat. He was not perfect. It is worth mentioning that his son, Dexter Scott King, became vegan, and then his wife, Coretta Scott King, became vegan towards the end of her life. But Martin Luther King himself still ate meat till the day he died. So it's important for him not to be self-righteous because there might be something he hasn't thought of yet that he's not doing correctly. And similarly, I believe, being passionately about this issue, there might be some other issues I'm not aware of that aren't even on my radar, that I'm, not even thinking about. That I could be doing something horribly wrong. And if that's the case, I want someone to bring it to my attention. A self-righteous person actually would not want people to bring that to their attention. They would say, no, I'm so certain I'm doing everything correctly. You don't even bother telling me about something I could be doing wrong because I'm so perfect. And that's the wrong attitude to have. I do think some vegans sometimes have that. They say, don't talk to me about ethics when you're still killing animals and torturing animals. Well, no, they should tell us something. Maybe there really is something we're doing in our life that's wrong, that somebody, maybe even though they themselves are not vegan, they might be aware of something we're doing wrong that we should be aware of. So I think it's good for somebody to talk to us. So I'm perfectly happy to I'm open to the possibility that there's something I'm not aware of that I'm doing wrong, and it's only someone who doesn't want to accept any criticism. That's the definition of self-righteous. And ironically, one of the characteristics of a self-righteous person is they automatically accuse everyone else of being self-righteous. The moment somebody tries to tell them, hey, look, what you're doing is wrong. Oh, you're being self-righteous. Well, no, it's the inability to accept criticism that makes you self-righteous, not the fact that by that logic, anyone who advocated the abolition of slavery was self-righteous. Anybody who advocated the abolition of gladiatorial combat was self-righteous. I mean, the point is, all those things used to be standard commonly accepted practices, and they've been practiced throughout all of history. Slavery was practiced since long before the dawn of recorded civilization. And in each case, morality progressed because a small number of people looked at the ethics of their society and concluded that it needed to be improved. And now is no better a time than any other point in history. Truth is not democratic. The world does not become flat just because the majority of the people think that it is.
Sometimes those same people, they almost liken it to a religion.
The courts in the United States have actually consistently ruled that veganism is not a religion because people actually tried to claim First Amendment protection for veganism, and they failed every time. The courts have consistently, and correctly in my opinion, ruled that veganism is not a religion, and therefore it doesn't have protection. You can be fired for being a vegan because it's not a religion. Now, the thing is that keep in mind there are people from all different religions that are vegan. There are vegan Christians, there are vegan Muslims, there are vegan Jews, there are vegan atheists. So that alone should demonstrate that it's not a religion. The very fact that people are following all these other religious traditions and they're vegan at the same time means that it's not a religion.
Doesn't religion usually have some sort of theist element, metaphysical component?
Sometimes. Jainism believes in reincarnation, but they don't believe in God. So, I mean, there are some exceptions to it. For however you define it, I mean, veganism is not a religion simply by the fact that there are people from all different religions who are vegan, and people without any religion at all who are vegan. Therefore, that alone would make it not a religion. And also, like I said, the U.S. courts have consistently, and I think it's actually a good thing, because if veganism was a religion, that would imply that you have to give up your present religion to become a vegan, which would make it very unattractive. And I don't care about trying to convert anyone from their religion. I just want them to go vegan. You know, and similarly, I don't care if they're a Democrat or a Republican or whatever. I just want them to go vegan. You know, and there are, of course, many Republican vegans, just as there are many Democrat vegans. It's not a question of being conservative or liberal. It's not a question of being religious or atheistic. There's vegan atheists, and there's vegan fundamentalist Christians and vegan fundamentalist Muslims too. Because, I mean, being opposed to cruelty to animals, being opposed to needlessly killing animals when we don't have to, that's something that cuts across the political divide and across all religious and secular philosophies.
What's something you would like to see happen in your lifetime?
Well, I'd like a vegan world, but I know I'm not going to get it, so I'll settle for a vegetarian world, and I think that's realistic. I genuinely do. This may not be true anymore. I don't know how old the oldest living person is, but it was true just a few years ago. There were people still alive today in whose lifetime television, airplanes, and computers were invented. Now, it's definitely true about televisions and computers. Airplanes, I don't know if the oldest living person, if that's still true, but it was true a few years ago where the oldest living person in their lifetime, airplanes were invented. So think of how different the world was before that happened. I mean, that was before World War I. I mean, you can think of how much has changed in that time. So think of someone being born today, all the changes they're going to see in their lifetime. I think a vegetarian world within my lifetime is realistic. In fact, I think it probably will happen, because I think the pace of change is very accelerating. Because keep in mind, if you would ask people in the 1950s how long it would take to get rid of racial segregation, most people would say it would be several hundred years at a minimum, if it could ever happen at all. And within their lifetime, Barack Obama was elected president. It looks like something will never happen, and then it happens very quickly. And just think of how much we've advanced recently for the vegan movement. It used to be you'd be the only vegan you know. Now there's lots of them. Now there's, we've made enormous gains. I'd like to take full credit for it, but I can't.
Some people argue plants have feelings.
There are vegans who think plants have the ability to feel pain. Okay, so first of all, even if plants did have the ability to feel pain, we'd all still have to go vegan. That's because plants are fed to the livestock, so by eating meat, we actually end up killing 10 times as many plants as we would on a vegan diet. Because livestock exists in such large numbers only because we breed them for slaughter, and only a small fraction of the food that an animal eats is converted into food for human consumption. So intrinsically, you're going to kill far more plants by feeding the plants to the livestock, breeding the livestock, and rather than just eating the plants directly yourself. The thing is, plants do not have a nervous system, therefore it's unlikely that they have the ability to feel pain and suffering, because at least in ourselves, our consciousness, as far as we understand it, is associated with our nervous system, and when a person is brain dead, we consider basically their consciousness is gone. They're still alive. They're actually still alive. They still have a heartbeat. Their cells are still alive. Sometimes people talk about how plants react. For example, when plants are eaten by insects, for example, they will respond with a chemical defense, and that proves that they have the ability to feel something. I would point out that a brain-dead human, when doctors harvest their organs for donation, their body will also exhibit a chemical defense. The body's trying to protect itself, but there's no consciousness present. So because there's no nervous system. So in the case of plants, most likely that's also the case.
So what about like oysters?
I don't eat oysters. I don't think I've ever eaten oysters, even before, when I still ate meat. So it's not an issue. I haven't studied it. I've never studied them. I don't know. It's not an area I'm familiar with, but I never ate them, so it was never an issue.
Yeah. I know, but some people think, well, maybe that's okay because it's not necessarily sentient. It doesn't have a brain.
Yeah, I've never studied the biology of oysters. I don't know anything about them. But I'll say, if you're not sure, it's better err on the side of safety and not eat it.
Do you think we'll ever get to a point where we're getting so much resistance that the only way to stop this is violence?
No. I believe that for the movement to be successful, we need to follow the path of Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. If Martin Luther King had advocated arson or vandalism, then racial segregation would still be around today. And I think any person in any social movement who advocates those tactics are hurting the cause they claim to believe in. And unfortunately, there are, in every movement, there are a few idiots like that. And I think the important thing is to speak out against it. Because if you don't speak out against it loudly enough and frequently enough, then we all get painted with the same broad brush.
And do you think it's our obligation to be advocates?
Yes. Now, I would say not everyone has the personality for it, but I think everyone has at least the obligation to be a vegan and to let everyone know that they're an ethical vegan. Meaning, don't try to hide behind the health argument. I mean, if you're really doing it for ethics, and someone asks you, oh, so why are you a vegan? Don't lie to them. Well, first of all, you shouldn't lie about anything. I mean, honesty is important in itself, but it's also important that people be aware of the fact that we are ethical vegans. We have a Holocaust going on all around us. And the only difference between what happened in the 1940s and what's going on today is that the people who spoke out in the 1940s were risking their lives, and many people chose to do so anyway. And the only thing people risking today is ridicule from their family and friends. And of course, unfortunately, that's one thing alone is enough for a lot of people to have stayed silent. I mean, even if they're vegan, they're afraid to actually mention it, even when they're asked about it, and I think that's unacceptable.
Do you think if somebody quits being vegan, they never really were?
That's ridiculous. That means you have no way of knowing if someone is vegan until the day they die. Let's suppose a person is vegan right now, and 20 years from now they stop being vegan. That means that right now they're not really a vegan, because once 20 years from now, once they stop being vegan, we basically rip the vegan label away from them retroactively throughout their whole life. That means right now they're not really a vegan.
Yeah.
So you have no way of knowing if they're vegan until they actually, until the day of their funeral and go, yep, he was really a vegan.
He made it.
Yeah. Otherwise, you have no way of knowing. I think it's a very disingenuous thing to say, because the thing is, part of it, I think the people who do it for health reasons are less likely to stay with it, because, as with any fad diet, if you're doing it for ethics, you're more likely to stay with it. But even then, people may fall off the wagon. But even for those people, they may fall off the wagon, but then they may come back. They may become vegan again later in the future. So what they need is encouragement, not to tell them, oh, you're never really a vegan in the first place. What they need to be basically encourage them to go back to being a vegan, if they slip up, not to be castigated. That doesn't do anybody any good.
Sometimes I hear vegans say, well, they're just doing it for health. It seems like it was something inside of you that enabled you to see the ethics. That everybody else who's not seeing that, maybe they're desensitized, maybe they're just so conditioned. Is it okay that they just do it for health? Are they still vegan enough?
Well, I mean, okay, obviously there's some debate about the definition of the word vegan. It is important with regards to how to label things at a restaurant, to make sure that everyone agrees on this. This has the vegan label, this is what it means. In terms of labeling people, I don't think it's that critical. I'm perfectly happy with someone calling themselves a vegan, even if, some other people might say, well, no, they technically don't meet the definition. It's not helpful to tell someone, oh, you're not a vegan. That's counterproductive. If someone is doing it for health reasons, I think it's at least good that they're not killing and torturing animals for their diet. They might still be doing it for their clothing, and that's where the technical definition of vegan comes in. Because if someone's a health vegan, I doubt they're going to change what they wear, for example. And many people would say to be a vegan, you have to have a vegan lifestyle, not just a vegan diet. One of the things I've heard is sometimes people go into it initially for health, and then the ethics comes in later. So they may have looked into it for one reason, but then they ended up sticking with it for the right reason. I'm perfectly happy that there are doctors out there advocating veganism and health reasons. Because one of the concerns of people who are thinking about going vegan, or their kids going vegan, is they're concerned about the health aspects. And it's good for these people to tell you, not only is it safe to go vegan, you're actually going to be healthier. So that addresses it. But my biggest concern about promoting the health, when animal rights activists promote the health as the central argument, is they reinforcing the attitude that animal suffering isn't that important. When you make this health is really here, and then there's an environment, and there's this tiny little reason over here that you're actually torturing millions of animals. You're basically reinforcing the attitude that that's not important. And not only that, when it comes from an animal rights activist, that makes the issue seem even less important. If the animal rights activists are afraid to say that they care about animals, how is the average person going to feel safe saying that they care about animals?
It's interesting. When I put something ethical out there, people don't respond to it. It doesn't get any views. I put the health stuff out there, and I get tons of response and reviews.
Okay, so part of it might just be an algorithm thing. Like the thing is, if you've clicked on a lot of videos recently or posts related to car racing, you'll get a whole bunch of stuff related to car racing. So if someone's recently been researching health issues and you post a health issue, that'll come up for them. But how many people have recently been researching the ethical philosophy? So that's why those posts are not going to be recommended to them. So that could be part of it. And the other thing is that the health argument is appealing to people who are nearing the end of their life and where they're starting to develop health problems. They very much do care about that. Young people tend to care more about ethics. And also, I would point out that young people have their life ahead of them. So they have, if you can get someone to go, this is going to sound horrible. If you convince someone to go vegan on their deathbed, it doesn't help animals as much as if you convince someone when they're young, not only in terms of the animals they would have eaten otherwise, but also in terms of all the interactions they're going to have with people and the ability to persuade other people. I don't want to sound ageist. There are plenty of people later in life who do respond to the ethical argument just as well as anybody else. But statistically, younger people in general tend to be open to new philosophies and to challenging their belief system. So if you know, the people are more likely to, for example, you know, change their political philosophy when they're younger than later on in life. It still happens when they're, but you're more likely to do it in your formative years. And similarly, that's actually, they're more likely but it's not impossible. I mean, some people do change.
Now, you said you're really left-brained. Do you find yourself getting wrapped up in the emotions ever over this?
Not when it comes to dealing with meat eaters. The only times that's become an issue is when I've dealt with other animal activists, because they become so emotional about it. Anyone who's been involved in activism for a while will tell you that, even if they don't say it publicly. But in general, dealing with other activists is far more difficult than just dealing with the general meat-eating public. And this is not just in animal activism. I found similar in other social movements, not just in this country, but in general. Like Mahatma Gandhi said, it was much more easier for him to deal with the British than it was with his own fellow Hindus. Because with the British, you know, he practiced nonviolence, you know, and the British would beat him up, and then he would look good on the cameras because look at how bad. But when his own fellow people on his side were engaging in violence, that was more difficult to deal with because that made his whole movement look bad. You know, and in fact, he had to pull out of certain campaigns just because he ended certain campaigns because there are few people on his side who engage in violence, and dealing with that is much more difficult than, you know, dealing with the people who you would think are your adversaries.
Do you feel like that's gotten better recently? Because I did notice there was a lot of riffing going on between, or nuanced battling going on, but it seems like it's subsided in recent years. I don't know.
Well, first of all, most of it is not done publicly. I mean, and because they don't want to air the dirty laundry in front of everybody. So I mean, you wouldn't know about it unless you're privately involved with it. On rare occasions, it does become public. You just hear a blurb, oh, so and so left an organization, and you don't know that there was something really ugly just happened.
I hope that being honest about this doesn't deter people.
It's human nature. It happens in every social movement. It happens in
anything humans are a part of.
Yeah. I think. Look. If getting along with each other is so easy, we would have had world peace centuries ago. So the point is that just as you know, humans have had wars since forever. Activists come from the same gene pool, so we're going to have the same tendency towards conflict that humans have had since forever. And I mean, first of all, it's healthy to have differing opinions. I mean, that's good. People are naturally going to have differing opinions and how to approach it. The problem is, can you have a civil conversation about it? And even if you disagree at the end, still be friends. And in what I found in many cases when I deal with, I'll tell you, many of my coworkers are hunters, for example, or raise their own animals for slaughter, and they're aware of the fact that I'm a vegan. Aside from the fact that's on my bumper sticker, I have a Vegan for Animals bumper sticker. I told them when I interviewed with them, because I felt that if this is going to cause a problem, better find out about it now. And they don't have a problem with it. They're perfectly happy with I'm a vegan. They're perfectly okay with me expressing my opinion, and I'm perfectly okay with them expressing theirs, and we're all friends. Unfortunately, when dealing with certain activists, they can't handle it. They cannot handle someone just expressing an opinion contrary to their own. It's not unique to animal rights activism. It happens a lot with humans in general, and especially recently with the cancel culture phenomena. Once somebody expresses an opinion you don't like, and that's it, they're fired from their job, or called a whole bunch of horrible names, or accused of horrible things just because they had a different opinion. And I think that's very unfortunate. And that's the type of thing I'm talking about, where you basically, they can't handle the fact that you express an opinion contrary to their own. I mean, you didn't call them names, you didn't say that they're a bad person, you said, well, no, I disagree with you on this point, and that's the end of the world for them. There's no solution for dealing with those type of people.
What's been the hardest argument to debunk or debate?
Oh, I don't think there are any hard arguments because the logic is on our side, therefore we should be very happy and eager. Like, for example, in science, when you think you have a scientific theory that you think is the right one, you should be eager to say, for people to try to challenge it. That's the way science works, that people try to challenge it and you say, oh, and then here's my response to that challenge. So that's the way, progressive ideas works. Because the ethical arguments are on our side, at least in my opinion, there are no strong arguments. However, I believe it's important to take all arguments seriously. Like, for example, when you said, well, this is a silly argument question. Oh, it's not silly to the person asking it. Even if you think it's silly, in their mind, they might be asking it with perfect seriousness. So it's important to treat it as a serious question, rather than just blow it off and go, oh, that's a stupid question. Just answer it seriously. I think a lot of vegans get needlessly offended when people are asking a question. Should be happy that people are curious.
Yeah.
I mean, even an innocent question like, how do you get your protein? I mean, they want to know more. Yeah. This is good. This is a good thing. Yeah. They're interested in, if I want to go vegan, how do I do it? And people get offended they're asking the question. Yeah. And I never understood that, why vegans would get upset at that. This is a good thing that they're asking these questions. And similarly, if they're asking philosophical, ethical questions, this is a good thing. It means they're thinking about it. Questions like, what would you do if you were on a deserted island, there's nothing else to eat? That's actually good. They're thinking about it. I mean, one possible answer is that, yeah, if you're stranded on a deserted island, in that case, it's okay. But since we're not stranded on a deserted island, we have other options available. One question I got once, for example, when I was giving the presentation was, at what point in our evolution did it become wrong for us to eat meat? And my response is, at the point in our evolution where it no longer became necessary for our survival. So the thing is, that's what separates us from predators like lions and tigers. They genuinely needed to survive. So similarly, if you're on a stranded island, you can argue that, and there generally was nothing else to eat, you can argue that, okay, now you're in the same category. But because what separates us is because we have other options available, therefore it's morally wrong for us to needlessly kill animals for food. That it's morally wrong if it's not necessary for your survival. And this is not a speciesist argument, because you could argue, like I said, that if there's nothing else to eat, that cannibalism in that situation is morally acceptable. That's preferable to everyone starving. The point is, no matter how stupid it appears to the person receiving the question, was, well, doesn't everyone already know that? That's fine. The person is genuinely curious, and he doesn't know. That's why he's asking. Or sometimes they do know, but they just want to hear. They're curious how you would respond. Because not everyone has the same answer. They have their own answer to it, but they're curious. Well, how will you answer?
And I find it intriguing how you seem to be so left-brained and emotionally detached from it, yet ethics is so at the core.
Right, well, and that's the thing, because for me, ethics is a rational enterprise. That you think about it rationally and try to come up with a logically consistent ethical theory. That's for me what it's all about. And a lot of other vegans, a lot of other people in the movement, their attitude is, oh, that animal is so cute, And maybe we come to the same conclusion that we should be vegan. We won't be able to agree maybe on the next thing, because I'm trying to reason rationally about it, and their motive was, well, the animal is cute, and therefore there's no way to try to rationally explain to them, well, if the next step in the logical progression. So yeah, I think that's the way ethics should be. It should be rational. Because if you go based on emotion, well, we've seen how humans have done well so far with that. It hasn't worked out very well. By the way, I would like to emphasize, this is where also another place where I differ from a lot of my vegan friends. I do include insects in my animal rights philosophy. I do not kill cockroaches, for example. I don't kill mosquitoes. And I believe, and it's the same thing, it's a logical, they do have a nervous system. I believe they do have the ability to feel pain. I do think they value their lives. And I think it's wrong to kill insects. Now, some vegans don't extend that, and I think part of it is because they're thinking entirely emotional. They have an emotional attachment to certain animals, but not others. They, for some reason, don't have an emotional attachment to insects. For me, ethics is a rational enterprise. There's absolutely no reason, there's no rational reason to exclude insects. To the dismay of some of my vegan friends, I am very, very passionate about the fact that insects do need to be included in our ethical theories.
I think it's important to include humans in the equation.
Absolutely, yeah, humans are animals. If you care about animals, you have to care about humans, because humans are animals. But whether or not we're animals or not isn't even the issue. The real issue is that ethics applies to all sentient beings. That includes humans, includes animals, including insects, and it also would extend to any other sentient beings we might find, for example, extraterrestrials or artificial intelligence or whatever else may come down the line.
So if humans are in the equation, then health really should be a part of that, right?
Right. Well, the good news is that veganism is healthy. So
I mean, like processed foods, for example, processed vegan food.
when you say something is unhealthy, how unhealthy is it? Are you going to die the next day if you eat it once? Or is it just means if you eat large quantities of it every single day, then you'll shorten your lifespan? In moderation, processed vegan donut is okay once in a while. Yeah, if that's all you're eating every day, you're in trouble.
If we're not 100% clear on what's healthy and what's not, then we might be advocating something that shortens health span and also is invasive to other life.
That's an issue that's, I would say, separate from veganism, because even people who eat meat, whether you're vegan or you're not, that's still an issue, because you could be eating packaged food for, the environmental packaging of the food you're eating, or how far away it's grown. That will be a factor in both cases. Similarly, in terms of health, some vegan foods are healthier than others, and similarly, some non-vegan foods are healthier than others. It's the same issue in both cases. But I think, like I said, I think those are all secondary issues. Not that they're unimportant, but when you have a Holocaust going all around you, try focusing on those types of questions minimizes just the seriousness of what's actually happening to the animals.
And you include insects in that.
Yes. It turns out going vegan actually helps the insects, because what it is there are some insects that are killed when you're harvesting crops. It's the same thing with rodents and other things. But then if you eat meat, you have to feed that to the livestock, and again, you end up having to do 10 times as much of that.
Of all the issues in the world, do you feel like veganism is the most pressing?
If there's something more important than ending the Holocaust, let me know what it is and I'll go and do it. Now, the thing is, even if you think there are other issues that are more important, since vegetarian diet is less expensive than one which includes meat, this will give people more money to spend on whatever issue they feel is the most important.
Do you have any recommendations for people ready to do this, how they can get started?
I'm not a nutrition expert, so I mean, I'll leave that to people who have medical degrees or nutrition degrees who want to give the advice on, like, here's what you have to do to make sure you're. And in fact, on my website, I have a link to other people's work that they've done. So it's because I'm not in a position to give nutrition advice. Once you're committed to it, it's easy. It's hard when you don't care. Obviously, it seems hard. But first of all, it's not as hard as you think it is when you first hear about it. Oh my, once you get involved, that you realize it's a lot easier than you thought. And the other thing is, even if it wasn't, it's a lot harder on the animals.